Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command room of Earth's biggest space station floating above the planet. The walls around him showed images of alien faces from across the galaxy. These beings came from worlds so far away that light took years to travel between them. Each face looked different from humans, but they all shared one thing. They looked down on Earth's people with disgust. The blue-skinned alien called Kelthar spoke first. His voice came through the speakers with a cold tone that made Jake's skin crawl. Kelthar ruled over billions of beings across dozens of star systems. His empire had weapons that could destroy planets and ships faster than light itself. Yet here he was talking to humans like they were children who had wandered into an adult meeting. "Captain Morrison, your kind has asked to join our council," Kelthar said while his large black eyes stared at Jake. "We have decided to give you one chance to prove you belong with us. You must face an enemy that has destroyed many of our best fleets." Jake felt sweat on his forehead but kept his face calm. Behind him stood Lisa Parker, his second in command. She was one of the smartest people Jake knew, and right now her fingers were moving on her tablet, taking notes on everything the alien said. Lisa had studied these alien races for years, preparing for this moment. Another alien appeared on the screen. This one had gray skin covered in metal plates that looked like armor grown from his body. His name was General Voxran, and he commanded fleets that numbered in the thousands. His red eyes glowed as he spoke. "The enemy you will face is called the Nexus Swarm," Voxran explained. "They are machines that think and build more of themselves. They eat planets to make materials for new ships. Every time we destroy one of their vessels, 10 more take its place." Jake listened carefully as the general described battles against these machines. The Nexus Swarm had appeared 6 months ago from unknown space. No one knew who built them, or why they attacked everything they found. The machines moved in perfect groups, working together like parts of one giant mind. They never made mistakes and never showed mercy. "We have lost over 2,000 ships fighting these machines," said another alien with green tentacles instead of arms. "Our best admirals and strongest weapons cannot stop them. They learn from every battle and become harder to defeat." The aliens had tried everything they could think of. Energy weapons that could melt asteroids barely scratched the machines. Missiles that could level cities were shot down before they hit their targets. Even ramming attacks with huge ships only destroyed a few machines while losing valuable vessels. "So why are you giving us this job?" Jake asked. "If your advanced fleets cannot win, why do you think humans can do better?" The aliens made sounds that Jake realized were laughter. Kelthar's mouth split open, showing rows of sharp teeth. "We do not expect you to win, Captain Morrison. We expect you to fail and learn your place in the galaxy." Jake felt anger rise in his chest but pushed it down. Getting mad would not help Earth now. Instead, he looked at the data they were showing him about the Nexus Swarm. The machines were smart and strong, but they followed patterns. Every attack was planned perfectly and every movement had a purpose. "What happens if we refuse this test?" Lisa asked from behind Jake. "Then Earth will be marked as a danger to galactic peace," Kelthar replied. "Your world will be surrounded by energy barriers. No ships will leave and no ships will enter. Your people will live and die on that one small planet forever." The threat was clear. Earth could join the galactic community by fighting an impossible battle or be locked away from the stars forever. For a species that had dreamed of traveling to other worlds, this was like being offered freedom or death. Jake thought about the people back on Earth. Billions of humans lived their lives looking up at stars and wondering what was out there. Scientists worked every day trying to build better ships and weapons. Children grew up reading stories about adventures in space. All of that would end if Earth was quarantined. "How much time do we have to prepare?" Jake asked. "The Nexus Swarm will reach the Kepler system in 30 days. General Voxran said. "That system has 3 inhabited planets with over 50 million beings. If the machines are not stopped there, they will continue toward more populated areas." Jake realized this was not just about Earth proving itself. Real people would die if the machines were not stopped. The aliens were using this crisis to test humanity, while also hoping humans might somehow succeed where they had failed. "We will need access to information about previous battles," Lisa said. "We want to study how these machines fight and learn from what others tried." "Of course," Kelthar said, with what might have been a smile. "We will share everything we know, though I doubt your primitive minds can understand tactics that confused our greatest generals." Jake looked at Lisa and saw her nod slightly. They both understood what was really happening here. The aliens thought humans were too stupid and weak to matter. They were giving Earth this impossible task, expecting failure. When humans lost, the aliens would point to the defeat as proof that Earth did not belong in galactic society. But Jake had studied human history and knew something the aliens did not. Humans had a long tradition of winning battles they were supposed to lose. From ancient times to modern wars, humans found ways to defeat stronger enemies through courage and clever thinking. "We accept your challenge," Jake said in a clear voice. "But we will fight this battle using human methods and human tactics." The alien faces on the screen showed surprise. They had expected humans to beg for an easier test or ask for help. Instead, Jake was talking like he had a plan to win. "Very well, Captain Morrison," Kelthar said. "You have 30 days to gather your forces and travel to Kepler. We will send observers to watch your battle. When you fail, remember that you chose this fate for your species." The communication ended and the screens went dark. Jake stood alone with Lisa in the quiet command room. Outside the windows, Earth turned slowly, showing the blue oceans and green lands where humanity was born. "Do you really think we can win?" Lisa asked quietly. Jake smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Lisa, these aliens have been fighting wars with computers and perfect strategies for thousands of years. They think warfare is about having the best weapons and the smartest plans. And you think they are wrong." "I know they are wrong," Jake replied. "They want to see our ancient tactics. I think it is time to show them what humans learned fighting each other for 10,000 years. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked through the shipyard floating in space near Mars. Around her, workers in spacesuits moved like ants building something much bigger than themselves. The sound of metal being cut and welded echoed through the station as humanity prepared for the most important battle in their history. Kate had been chosen to lead Earth's fleet because she understood both old and new ways of fighting. She had studied battles from Earth's past while also learning how to command ships that traveled faster than light. Her gray hair was tied back and her blue eyes were sharp as she watched the construction work. "Admiral, the alien observers want to see our battle plans," said Danny Carter, her communications officer. He was young with brown hair and looked nervous about talking to beings from other worlds. "Tell them no," Kate replied without stopping her walk. "They wanted to see human tactics, so that is exactly what they will get." The aliens had sent 3 ships to watch humanity prepare for battle. The vessels were beautiful with smooth curves and glowing lights. They hung in space like jewels while human ships looked like metal boxes with engines attached. But Kate knew that looks could fool people about what really mattered. In the planning room, the best military minds from Earth gathered around tables covered with star maps and battle data. Colonel Amy Foster pointed at images of the Nexus swarm, while Major Ryan Hughes took notes on everything they learned about the enemy. "These machines fight like a computer program," Amy said as she studied how the robots moved in previous battles. "They form perfect shapes in space and never waste any movement. Every ship knows exactly where to be and when to fire. That makes them predictable," Ryan added. "If you think like a machine, you can guess what they will do next." Kate nodded as she listened to her officers talk. The data from alien battles showed the same pattern over and over. The Nexus swarm would arrive in neat formations, then advance toward enemy fleets using the shortest path. They would fire at the largest targets first and focus their attacks to destroy ships quickly. "The problem is that every alien race fights the same way," said Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez. He was older than the others with white hair and scars from battles on Earth. "They use logic and mathematics to decide how to move their ships. The machines were built to fight enemies who think that way." Kate pulled up records of human battles from Earth's history. Images appeared showing ancient armies and old warships. The officers studied fights that happened hundreds or thousands of years ago, when humans used swords and cannons instead of energy weapons. "Look at Thermopylae," Kate said, pointing to a picture of Greek soldiers fighting a much larger army. 300 Spartans held off thousands of Persians by choosing the right place to fight. They did not try to match enemy numbers. Instead, they used the land to make numbers not matter. Steve nodded and brought up another battle. Agincourt in 1415. English longbowmen defeated French knights who had better armor and weapons. The English king chose muddy ground that slowed down the heavy cavalry. "What about naval battles?" asked Amy as she looked for patterns in ship combat. Kate smiled and showed them records from World War II. Torpedo boats attacking battleships. Small, fast vessels getting close to huge warships and hitting weak spots. The big ships had more guns and thicker armor, but they could not hit targets that moved in unexpected ways. The officers spent hours studying how humans had won battles against stronger enemies. They found the same ideas appearing over and over. Use speed against strength. Attack where the enemy does not expect. Make the enemy's advantages work against them. The aliens think we are primitive because our weapons are simple, Ryan said. But maybe simple is better when fighting machines that expect complex attacks. Kate agreed with this thinking. The Nexus swarm had been built to fight fleets with advanced energy shields and smart missiles. The machines might not know how to deal with basic kinetic weapons that just smashed into targets. We need to think about this differently, Kate told her officers. Every alien race that fought these machines tried to outthink them. They used careful plans and logical moves. The machines learned to counter that kind of fighting. Amy leaned forward with interest. So what should we do instead? We should fight like humans, Kate replied. We should be unpredictable and take risks that no computer would calculate. We should do things that make no sense to a logical mind. The planning sessions continued for weeks as the fleet grew larger. Ships arrived from every human colony carrying crews eager to prove their species belonged among the stars. The vessels were not pretty like alien ships, but they were solid and reliable. Captain Pete Williams commanded a destroyer called Defiance. His crew had painted shark teeth on the front of their ship and played loud music during training exercises. The alien observers reported this behavior as evidence that humans were not serious about warfare. Commander Nicole Adams led a cruiser named Valiant. She had her weapons teams practice firing patterns that seemed random, but were based on how birds flew in flocks. When asked to explain, she just smiled and said the aliens would understand during the battle. Kate watched her captains prepare their crews and felt proud of what she saw. These humans did not have the best technology or the most experience fighting in space. But they had something the machines could not understand or copy. Admiral, we are getting reports from the Kepler system, Danny said as he brought her the latest information. The Nexus swarm has destroyed 2 more planets. They will reach the inhabited worlds in 5 days. Kate looked at the star map showing where the battle would happen. The Kepler system had wide open space between planets, which meant no place to hide or use terrain advantages. It would be a straight fight between human ships and robot vessels with nowhere to run. How many ships will we have, she asked. 200 vessels, including support craft, Steve reported. The aliens say the Nexus swarm has over 10,000 units. The numbers were bad, but Kate had expected that. Humans always seem to end up fighting against impossible odds. She thought about all the battles in history where small forces defeated large armies through courage and smart thinking. Gather all ship captains for a final meeting, Kate ordered. It is time to explain how we are going to win this fight. That evening, the captains filled the main briefing room. Kate looked at their faces and saw determination mixed with fear. These men and women knew they might die in the coming battle, but they were ready to fight anyway. The aliens expect us to fail, Kate began. They think we will line up our ships and trade shots with the machines until we are all destroyed. They believe warfare is about having better weapons and following perfect tactics. She paused and looked around the room. But human warfare has never been about perfection. We fight with heart and soul. We take chances that others think are crazy. We find ways to win when winning should be impossible. Captain Tony Martinez raised his hand. What exactly are you asking us to do, Admiral? Kate smiled. I am asking you to fight like humans instead of trying to copy alien methods. Be unpredictable. Take risks. Do things that make no logical sense. Show these machines what happens when they face an enemy that refuses to follow the rules. The captains nodded and began asking questions about specific tactics. Kate answered each one while feeling more confident about their chances. The aliens had made one big mistake when they challenged humanity. They assumed humans would fight like every other species in the galaxy. Instead, Earth's warriors were about to show the universe something it had never seen before. The Nexus swarm came out of hyperspace like a nightmare made of metal and death. 10,000 robotic ships appeared in perfect formation, creating geometric patterns that stretched across hundreds of miles of empty space. Each vessel was identical to the others with sharp edges and glowing red lights that pulsed like heartbeats. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from the bridge of her flagship as the enemy fleet took position. The machines moved with precision that no living crew could match. Every ship knew exactly where to go and how fast to travel. Within minutes, they had formed attack formations that military computers called mathematically perfect. My God, whispered Commander Lisa Parker as she stared at the tactical display. I have never seen anything so organized. The alien observers were also watching from their safe distance. Admiral Kyrix of the Centauri Federation sent a message to Kate's ship. His blue face appeared on the communication screen with an expression of worry, mixed with curiosity. "Human fleet, your formation appears disorganized," Kyrix said in his mechanical translator voice. "The enemy will exploit your scattered positions and destroy you in sections." Kate looked at her own fleet displayed on the tactical screen. Compared to the perfect geometry of the Nexus swarm, her ships did look random and sloppy. Human vessels were spread across space with gaps between them that seemed to invite attack. Some ships hung alone while others clustered in small groups. "Thank you for the advice, Admiral Kyrix," Kate replied politely, then switched to her fleet communication channel. "All ships remember what we practiced. Fight like humans, not like computers." The human captains acknowledged her orders with voices that mixed fear and excitement. These men and women had trained for this moment, but seeing the enemy in person was different from studying data files. The Nexus swarm looked unstoppable, like a force of nature that would sweep away everything in its path. Captain Pete Williams stood on the bridge of his destroyer Defiance and felt his heart beating fast. His crew of 30 humans looked small compared to the thousands of machines approaching them. But Pete remembered what Admiral Sullivan had taught them about human warfare. "Weapons team, prepare for random firing pattern Delta," Pete ordered. "Engine room, get ready for emergency acceleration on my mark." His officers looked confused because the firing pattern he chose made no tactical sense. It would waste ammunition and leave his ship exposed to counterattack. But Pete trusted his admiral and believed in the human way of fighting. The Nexus machines began their advance using formation patterns that had defeated every enemy they faced. Their computer brains calculated optimal approach vectors and firing solutions. The robots expected human ships to respond with logical defensive moves based on standard military doctrine. Instead, something impossible happened. Commander Nicole Adams in her cruiser, Valiant, suddenly broke formation and charged straight toward the center of the enemy fleet. Her ship accelerated to maximum speed while spinning like a top and firing weapons in all directions. The move violated every rule of space combat and should have resulted in her immediate destruction. But the Nexus machines hesitated. Their programming had no instructions for dealing with an enemy that deliberately chose the worst possible tactical option. The computers tried to calculate why a ship would expose itself to concentrated fire from multiple angles. When no logical reason could be found, the machines began running diagnostic checks on their own systems. "What is that human doing?" demanded General Voxran from his observation ship. "She has doomed her vessel and accomplished nothing." Kate smiled as she watched the tactical display. "She is being human, General. Something your machines cannot understand or predict." More human ships began moving in ways that made no sense. Captain Roy Anderson brought his heavy cruiser to a complete stop in the middle of the battlefield. Lieutenant Commander Tony Martinez led his fighter squadron in patterns based on how fish moved in schools. Every human captain was doing something different and seemingly random. The Nexus swarm's perfect formations began to wobble as individual machines tried to respond to threats that followed no logical pattern. Computers that had been programmed to counter every known military tactic found themselves facing something entirely new. "Enemy ships are having trouble maintaining formation," reported Weapons Officer Jenny Powell from her station. "Their targeting systems cannot establish firing locks on our vessels." Kate nodded as she watched the battle develop. The first part of her plan was working. By refusing to fight like logical beings, humans were confusing machines that expected rational behavior. But this was only the beginning. "All ships execute Phase 2, Kate commanded over the fleet channel. What had looked like chaos suddenly revealed hidden purpose. Every seemingly random movement had been carefully planned to put the Nexus ships exactly where humans wanted them. The scattered human fleet began moving toward specific positions while continuing their unpredictable maneuvers. Lieutenant Commander Carl Thompson studied his sensor readings and realized what was happening. "Admiral, the enemy formation is beginning to compress. They are clustering their ships together to maintain mutual support." "Perfect," Kate replied. "Just like we hoped they would." The Nexus machines were following their programming by grouping together when faced with unexpected threats. This was logical behavior that had worked against every previous enemy. Concentrated firepower and overlapping defensive fields were the best response to chaotic attacks, but humans had studied this tendency in the battle data provided by the aliens. Kate's officers had predicted exactly how the machines would react to unpredictable human behavior. Now the trap was ready to be sprung. "Enemy fleet has achieved maximum concentration," reported Amy Foster from the tactical station. "All ships are within the target zone." Kate took a deep breath and thought about all the human battles she had studied. Ancient generals who had used enemy strengths against them. Naval commanders who had turned disasters into victories through bold action. This was humanity's chance to prove they belonged among the stars. "Signal all ships," Kate ordered. "Begin the Cannae maneuver." The reference to Hannibal's greatest victory was not lost on the human captains. Over 2,000 years ago, a brilliant general had used Roman discipline against the Roman army. By allowing the enemy to advance into a trap, he had turned their strength into weakness. Now, humanity was about to do the same thing to machines that thought they were invincible. Captain Pete Williams received the signal and felt excitement replace his fear. "All ships, this is Defiance beginning attack run. Let's show these machines what happens when they mess with Earth." His destroyer accelerated toward the compressed Nexus formation while his crew cheered. Around him, other human ships were doing the same thing. What had looked like a disorganized retreat was actually the beginning of a coordinated assault. The Nexus swarm realized too late that they had been manipulated into exactly the position humans wanted. Their perfect formation had become a perfect target. The machines tried to spread out again, but human ships were already closing in from all directions. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Nicole Adams as her spinning cruiser approached the enemy center. "All weapons charged and ready to fire." Kate watched the tactical display show human ships converging on the trapped enemy formation. The aliens had demanded to see humanity's ancient tactics. Now they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy was about to reach its climax. The human fleet closed in on the trapped Nexus swarm like wolves surrounding prey. But this was not a simple attack where stronger forces overwhelmed weaker ones. This was something the galaxy had never seen before. Organized chaos that turned military logic upside down. Commander Tony Martinez led his fighter squadron in what he called the Broken Formation. His 12 small ships moved through space like a flock of birds that had lost their way. They twisted and turned in patterns that seemed random, but were actually based on how starlings moved through Earth's skies. The Nexus fighter robots tried to intercept Tony's squadron using standard pursuit algorithms. Their computers calculated where the human ships would be based on their current speed and direction. But every time the machines fired their weapons, the human fighters had already moved somewhere else. "They keep missing us," reported Lieutenant Danny Hayes from his fighter cockpit. "Their targeting systems cannot predict our flight paths." Tony smiled as he pulled his ship through a spiral that would have made no sense to any military academy. "That is because we are not flying like pilots, Danny. We are flying like animals that know how to survive." The confusion was spreading through the entire Nexus fleet. Machines that had been programmed to counter every known military tactic found themselves facing something that broke all the rules. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to behave logically? On his cruiser, Valiant Commander Roy Anderson had decided to try something even more extreme. He ordered his ship to come to a complete stop right in the middle of the enemy formation. The massive vessel just hung in space like a metal mountain, while Nexus ships swarmed around it. "Sir, this is suicide," protested his weapons officer. "We are surrounded by hundreds of enemy vessels." "Exactly," Roy replied with a grin. "They were programmed to chase running targets and maintain optimal firing distances. But what do you do with prey that refuses to run?" The Nexus ships were indeed confused by this behavior. Their programming told them to pursue fleeing enemies and destroy targets that tried to escape. But Roy's cruiser was not fleeing or fighting back in any recognizable way. It just sat there like a rock in a stream of water. The machines began circling the human ship while their computers tried to determine the correct response. Some robots moved closer to investigate, while others maintained defensive positions. The perfect coordination of the Nexus swarm started to break down as individual units followed different programs. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the battle unfold from her flagship and felt proud of her captains. Each human commander was using tactics that would have been considered insane by any military computer. But together, their seemingly random actions were creating exactly the effect she had planned. Enemy formation coherence is dropping to 60%, reported Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez from his tactical station. Individual units are operating independently instead of as a unified force. Kate nodded as she studied the display. The Nexus swarm's greatest strength had always been their ability to work together as one giant mind. But human unpredictability was forcing the machines to act like separate entities trying to solve different problems. Signal all ships to begin Phase 3, Kate ordered. Time to show them what human creativity can really. Tours Captain Linda Hayes received the signal aboard her strike cruiser, Freedom, and immediately put her crew to work on something that would have horrified any sane military planner. She ordered her ship to begin ramming attacks against the larger Nexus vessels. Captain, ramming is a last resort tactic, her first officer protested. We should only use it when we have no other options. Who says this is last resort? Linda replied as she aimed her ship at a Nexus battlecruiser. Sometimes the best way to open a door is to kick it down. Her cruiser accelerated toward the enemy vessel while the crew braced for impact. The Nexus ship tried to move away but found itself blocked by other machines that were still trying to maintain formation. The collision tore through both vessels, but the human ship had been designed to survive such impacts. Ramming successful, Linda reported as her damaged but functional cruiser pulled away from the destroyed enemy. Moving to next target. The psychological effect of this attack rippled through the Nexus fleet. The machines had been programmed to preserve themselves while maximizing damage to enemies. They could not understand opponents who willingly accepted damage to inflict greater harm on their targets. Commander Alex Turner took the ramming tactic even further. He ordered his entire squadron of destroyers to charge the enemy formation like ancient cavalry, attacking infantry. The small human ships moved at maximum speed while firing everything they had. This is Turner to all destroyers, he broadcast. We are going to hit them so hard they will think a planet fell on them. The sight of human ships deliberately throwing themselves at superior enemies had an unexpected effect on the Nexus machines. Their programming began generating error messages as they tried to process behavior that violated every rule of logical combat. How do you calculate the optimal response to enemies who ignore their own survival? Lieutenant Commander, Jenny Powell was commanding a group of missile boats when she decided to try something completely different. Instead of targeting the largest enemy ships like military doctrine suggested, she began attacking the smallest Nexus vessels with massive weapons. Designed for capital ships, ma'am, those are anti-battleship missiles, her weapons officer pointed out. Using them against fighters is wasteful. Unless the goal is not efficiency but confusion, Jenny replied as she watched enormous explosions destroy tiny enemy ships. Let them try to figure out why we are using sledgehammers to swat flies. The Nexus computers were indeed struggling to understand this behavior. Their tactical algorithms assumed enemies would use appropriate weapons against appropriate targets. The sight of humans wasting powerful missiles on small targets suggested either incompetence or some unknown strategy. As the battle continued, the alien observers watched in amazement from their safe distance. Admiral Kyrix of the Centauri Federation found himself staring at displays that showed impossible things happening. How are the humans achieving this? He asked his science officer. Their individual ships are weaker, and their weapons are primitive. By every calculation, they should have been destroyed within minutes. I do not understand it either, sir, the science officer replied. They appear to be violating fundamental principles of military strategy, yet somehow they are winning. General Voxeran was having similar thoughts aboard his observation vessel. The gray-skinned warrior had commanded fleets for over a century and thought he understood all forms of combat. But these humans were showing him something entirely new. They fight like madmen, he muttered while watching human ships perform maneuvers that should have been impossible. No rational being would use such tactics. Back in the battle, Captain Pete Williams was proving that point by ordering his destroyer to fly backwards while shooting in 3 different directions. His crew thought he had lost his mind, but they followed orders anyway. The result was that Nexus ships trying to attack him kept finding themselves in the wrong position. Sir, the enemy cannot establish a firing solution, his tactical officer reported with amazement. Every time they line up a shot, we have moved somewhere they did not expect. Pete laughed as he watched confused robot ships trying to chase his backwards flying destroyer. That is the difference between us and them, son. They think warfare is mathematics. We know it is art. Admiral Kate Sullivan felt the momentum of battle shifting in humanity's favor. The Nexus swarm's perfect formations had dissolved into scattered groups of confused machines. Individual robots were making conflicting decisions as their programming struggled to cope with human unpredictability. All ships prepare for final phase, Kate broadcast to her fleet. Time to finish what we started. The scattered human vessels began moving toward new positions for the killing blow. What had looked like random chaos was about to reveal its true purpose. The aliens had demanded to see humanity's ancient tactics, and now they would witness the final lesson in human warfare. Victory was within reach. The final phase of the battle began as Admiral Kate Sullivan gave the order that would determine humanity's fate among the stars. Her scattered fleet suddenly revealed the true purpose behind their seemingly chaotic movements. Every random maneuver and impossible tactic had been leading to this moment. Execute canny formation, Kate commanded across all communication channels. The reference to Hannibal's greatest victory at Cannae was not lost on the human captains who had studied ancient warfare for months. Over 2,000 years ago, the Carthaginian general had used Roman strength against the Roman army itself. Now humanity was about to repeat that masterpiece on a galactic scale. Captain Linda Hayes aboard the strike cruiser Freedom led the northern arm of the envelopment. Her damaged ship still moved well enough to coordinate with dozens of other vessels that had been positioned during the chaotic fighting. What the Nexus swarm thought was random movement had actually been careful positioning for a massive trap. Flanking maneuver complete, Linda reported as her ships closed in from the side. Enemy fleet concentrated in kill zone as planned. The Nexus machines finally realized what had happened to them, but it was too late to escape. While they had been trying to respond to unpredictable human tactics, they had been herded into exactly the position the humans wanted. The perfect enemy formation had become a perfect target. Commander Alex Turner brought his destroyer squadron around from the southern approach. His ships were battered from their ramming attacks but still functional enough to complete their mission. The sight of human vessels, closing in from all directions, finally triggered alarm responses in the Nexus computer systems. Enemy attempting to break out of encirclement, reported Turner as robot ships tried to scatter, moving to intercept escape routes, but the machines were trapped by their own programming. When faced with threats from multiple directions, their computers tried to maintain formation coherence while also defending against attacks. The two objectives conflicted with each other, creating decision loops that slowed their response time. Captain Pete Williams led the final assault with his backwards flying destroyer and a group of fighters that moved like drunken birds. His unconventional tactics had drawn enemy attention away from the real threat while other human ships moved into position. "This is Williams to all units," he broadcast while his ship spun through impossible maneuvers. "Time to show these machines what happens when they mess with Earth." The human fleet converged on the trapped Nexus swarm from 6 different directions. But this was not a simple crushing attack where superior numbers overwhelmed weaker forces. This was something far more sophisticated, a demonstration of human creativity that turned enemy strengths into weaknesses. Lieutenant Commander Jenny Powell had saved her most powerful missiles for this moment. Instead of using them against individual targets, she coordinated with other missile boats to create overlapping fields of destruction. The weapons were not aimed at specific ships but at the empty space between enemy vessels. "Firing pattern Omega," she announced as hundreds of missiles streaked toward the enemy formation. "Let's see how they handle explosions they cannot predict." The Nexus ships tried to shoot down the incoming missiles using point defense systems designed for conventional attacks. But the human weapons were not following standard approach vectors. Some missiles curved in spirals while others flew straight, then made sudden turns. The robot defenses could not track so many unpredictable targets. Commander Tony Martinez brought his fighter squadron in for close-range attacks, using tactics based on how wolves hunted in packs. His small ships darted between the larger enemy vessels like predators separating prey from the herd. The Nexus fighters that tried to intercept them found themselves facing opponents who refused to fight fair. "Break their formations," Tony ordered his pilots. "Make them fight as individuals instead of a unified force." The psychological warfare was working even on machines. The Nexus computers had been programmed to expect rational responses from rational enemies. When faced with humans who seemed to enjoy taking risks and making impossible choices, the artificial minds began experiencing something like panic. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the final collapse of enemy resistance from her flagship bridge. The mighty Nexus swarm that had terrorized the galaxy was being torn apart by a smaller human fleet using tactics that violated every rule of modern warfare. Enemy. Command structure is failing, reported Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez from his sensor station. Individual units are acting independently without coordination. Kate nodded as she observed the death of a legend. The Nexus swarm had seemed invincible because they fought like a perfect machine, but humans had shown them something no computer could understand: the power of controlled chaos guided by intelligence and courage. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as their greatest military challenge was systematically destroyed by the species they had considered primitive. Admiral Kyrix of the Centauri Federation found himself staring at tactical displays that showed impossible things happening. How did they achieve this? Kyrix asked his science officer in a voice filled with wonder. The humans were outnumbered 50-1 and their technology is centuries behind ours. I believe, Admiral, that they used something we forgot long ago, the science officer replied quietly. They fought with their hearts instead of just their minds. General Voxran was having similar thoughts aboard his observation ship. The gray-skinned warrior had commanded fleets across dozens of star systems, but had never seen anything like this battle. These humans had rewritten the rules of warfare before his eyes. Signal the human admiral, Voxran ordered. I must speak with her. Kate received the communication request and accepted it. The alien general's face appeared on her screen, showing an expression she had not seen before. Respect mixed with curiosity. Admiral Sullivan, how did you defeat an enemy that destroyed our best fleets? Voxran asked directly. Kate looked at the tactical display showing the last few Nexus ships being hunted down by her captains. The great robotic armada was broken and scattered, while her human fleet remained mostly intact. The impossible had become reality through courage and creativity. You asked to see our ancient tactics, General, Kate replied with a slight smile. We gave you exactly what you requested. We fought the way humans have always fought when facing impossible odds. But your methods violated every principle of logical warfare. Voxran protested. Your captains took risks that should have resulted in disaster. That is the point, Kate explained patiently. The Nexus machines were programmed to fight logical enemies who followed predictable patterns. We showed them something they could never understand: the human refusal to accept defeat. The last enemy ship was destroyed by a ramming attack from Captain Roy Anderson's heavy cruiser. The vessel that had sat motionless in the middle of the battle finally moved to crush the final robot with its massive bulk. The Nexus swarm that had terrorized the galaxy was no more. Human fleet, this is Admiral Kyrix, came the transmission from the Centauri observer ship. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally welcome Earth as a full member of our alliance. Kate felt pride swell in her chest as she looked around her bridge. Her crew of 30 humans had helped lead their species to victory against impossible odds. They had proven that humanity deserved a place among the stars not through superior technology, but through the strength of the human spirit. Thank you, Admiral Kyrix, Kate replied. We look forward to working with all council members as equals. The alien fleet that had come to witness humanity's expected defeat now escorted the human vessels home as heroes. News of the victory spread across the galaxy, as species that had considered Earth primitive began to reassess their opinions. In the end, humanity had not won because they had better ships or weapons. They had won because they understood something that advanced civilizations had forgotten. True strength did not come from perfection or logic, but from the willingness to take risks and find opportunity in chaos. The Nexus swarm had demanded rational responses to rational challenges. Instead, humanity had delivered something far more dangerous: the unpredictable power of beings who refused to give up no matter how bad the odds looked. Earth's children had finally found their place among the stars.